Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. Here I have half a kilo of beans. I bought these from an Asian store. They're very similar to pinto, but you can use whatever kind of beans you like. Some people make it with black beans, and you can choose whatever you prefer. These beans have been soaking in water for a few hours. Some people leave them overnight. After soaking them, I'm just going to throw away the water. I'm going to rinse them for a bit, and then my beans are ready for me to cook them. You might buy your beans pre-cooked, but I really like to make them from scratch because I can choose what I'm going to season them with and they just taste better. I'm using a pressure pot, but you can also use a normal pot on the stove. I will add a medium-sized onion cut in half. I'm adding 4 garlic cloves. I will also season with some salt. I will usually add a handful of fresh epazote, but I cannot find that in Finland so easily, so I'm gonna use 1 avocado tree leaf. I happen to have a plant at home, so it's very convenient, but you can also add whatever you season your beans normally with. Finally, I have these 5 or 6 bones with bone marrow. They still have some meat stuck to the bone. This will give a lot of flavor, some grease, and it will make your beans really rich, really tasty. Finally, I will add some water, and I want to make sure it's enough water to cover all the ingredients and maybe go on top of them by a couple fingers. Finally, I will close my pot and set it for 40 minutes on high pressure. If you cook them on the stove, you have to boil them for 2 hours. And you have to add way more water and make sure the water doesn't consume, so you might even have to add some water at some point. These beans are delicious and it could be definitely a plate on its own. You can definitely recognize the taste and the smell of bone marrow. Bone marrow, if you've ever had before, is a very rich flavor. It's a complete mouthful. When you try it, you will definitely get this flavor all over your mouth. Once you have eaten it, that flavor lingers there for a while. It's really beautiful. Here you can see the bone marrow is perfectly cooked, and we will definitely use all these. We will divide the beans and the broth and use them at different times. What I would usually do with the bone marrow is take every bone and use maybe a knife to remove all the bone marrow, throw that into the broth and make sure it mixes there. But I will also make a small snack for myself since I'm cooking, and I will take a freshly handmade tortilla, corn of course. I will set a bone on top. As I said, I will use a knife to make sure it comes off. Spread it a bit on top of my tortilla. Once I have spread the bone marrow on my tortilla, I will just sprinkle a bit of salt on top. I'll roll this up, and here you have the most flavorful snack you'll ever taste. It's just beautiful. Once we have the beans ready, we can continue with our chili. For that, I'm going to first prepare all the rest of the ingredients, and I'm going to start by chopping 1 big onion. Personally, I like chopping the onion really small, so it mixes nicely with everything else, but you can also make some strips if you prefer. It's completely up to you. To the mix, we're adding some red pepper. You have seen it in some other preparations we've made, like the discada for example. It brings a lot to the dish, a lot of flavor, and we're going to cut it into small cubes, add it in there. I guarantee you won't even notice it's there at the end, but it definitely brings a lot of flavor to it. The next thing I have to prepare is chorizo. Normally, I would use the Mexican one and I would just take it and throw it into the pot because it's like a paste and you don't really need to do anything. But in this case, I have the Spanish one, I have 200 grams. I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to cut it into small cubes. It's exactly the same, the flavor is very similar, but the consistency is different, so we need to do this. I have a large pot on the stove. It's on a 4 out of 6, so medium-high fire. I'm going to add just a splash of canola oil. It's already warm. I'm going to start by adding the chorizo into the pot, and you will notice immediately how the oil starts to turn into this bright red orange kind of color. That's all the fat and all the flavor from the chorizo coming out, and that's definitely what we want. We're throwing the chorizo first because we want that oil to impregnate everything else that we throw into the pot, and definitely that's one of the biggest sources of flavor in this dish. Our chorizo has been cooking for maybe 2-3 minutes, and you can already tell there's a lot of liquid in there. So at this point I'm going to add the onion. I will keep stirring this from time to time. I don't want anything to burn, but also I want you to notice how the onion immediately turns into this bright orange, bright red kind of color. That's exactly what we want. At this point, we will add our bell pepper or paprika, and we're going to mix everything. We want the onion and the bell pepper to cook at the same time. Just as with the onion, as soon as we add it, we want to mix everything and make sure everything is cooking at the same speed. Once we have the chorizo, the paprika, and the onion, we're going to add our meat. I'm using 700 grams of ground beef, but of course you can also use half and half if you prefer. It's completely up to you. Once we add the meat, we want to make sure everything mixes nicely. Once our meat has mixed, we can start seasoning. I'm going to start by adding 2 tablespoons of Ancho chili powder. Ancho chili is not very spicy, so you don't have to worry about it, and it will bring a lot of flavor into our chili. After that, I will also add 2 tablespoons of smoked paprika. This will bring a bit of smoky flavor into our dish. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of garlic powder. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of oregano. If you happen to find Mexican oregano, then even better. I'm using 1 tablespoon of cumin. It's not something we use very often in Mexican food, but it's definitely used a lot in Tex Mex cuisine. I'm also adding some coriander seeds. I'm also adding 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Don't worry, it won't make the dish sweet, but it will bring a lot of flavors up. I'm not yet done with the seasoning, but I don't want this to be too long without moving, because I don't want to burn anything on the bottom. So I'll just mix everything and continue my seasoning. Of course, we're going to use some freshly ground black pepper. I'm going to add a can of crushed tomatoes. This is a 400 grams can, and some people might use puree, some people might use paste, some people might use sauce. This is completely up to you. I prefer to have it a bit more chunky. That's the reason I use this kind of crushed tomato. Of course, we need to use some salt, and I'm going to add the salt right now. Earlier, I told you that we would separate the beans from the liquid we cook them in. The reason is we're adding the liquid into this mix. I'm adding about 1.2 liters in here. We still want to boil these for about 40 minutes so all the flavors would concentrate. And if we would add the beans in here, they would overcook and just start falling apart. This chili is seasoned already, but as I said, Ancho chili is not spicy at all. So personally, I like to add a bit of chipotle. You can also add some powdered chipotle, but I really like these smoked ones. So I'm going to take a couple spoons of the liquid, and I'm also going to take a whole chipotle chili, throw it in there. So when it starts boiling, then all the flavors will mix and it will have a bit of a kick. We mix it once more, and as you can see, the consistency is quite liquid. So we're going to boil these for about 40 minutes. It could be less, it could be more. Let's see how it goes. After 40 minutes, our sauce has reduced quite a lot. As you can tell, the color has also changed. This starts smelling quite good. Consistency is completely up to you. Some people like it more like a soup, some people like it more dry, so you decide what's the texture you prefer. Now I am adding the beans. At this point, because we have reduced the sauce, then this will become more like a thick kind of stew. And that's exactly what we want, because we don't want it to be too liquid, because I'm going to also make some chili dogs later. Once we have mixed the beans in, I'm going to let this boil for a bit, probably 10-15 minutes. After that time, our beans should have integrated into our dish, and now our chili is ready and everything has come together. Now we have to top our chili, and for that I'm going to top it with some grated cheddar cheese. Our chili is hot, so this cheese will slowly melt into our dish. I'm going to add a bit of sour cream. You can also use creme fraiche or something similar. Finally, I'm going to add also some pickled jalapenos. This is the kind of pickled jalapeno you would use for nachos usually, but I think these are perfect because you can take one with each spoon you take, and to be honest, the flavor just goes perfectly with the chili. Chili is delicious by itself, but in the north of Mexico, we also have chili dogs. Chili dogs are a hot dog in which we also add some chili. Some people add mustard, some people add ketchup, some people add both. You also add some cheese, because the chili is hot and you will melt it, and then you cover everything with some chili. This is one of those dishes that it's going to be messy, but you know it's going to be also delicious. Finally, we can top our chili dogs with some fresh onion and some pickled jalapenos. As I said, the jalapenos are optional, especially if you use the chipotle, because this might already have a bit of a kick. This is how I make this chili con carne. I really like these chili dogs, they're quite nice. I hadn't had many of these before, because this is more something that you would find maybe on the north, maybe in Baja California, these kind of places, but they're really good. You can also serve your chili con carne just on a plate with a spoon as I served it, and have it as a main course. You can also have it maybe a bit more thick and just serve it on the center of the table, have it there with some tortilla chips as a snack, or maybe some pieces of bread, or however you prefer it. You can also serve it, I would really like this with some rice. Just have some plain rice, white rice, and then have the chili on top just to have a bit more of like a filling texture. And I really like this kind of dish. It's very simple. I would say this is like, I'm not really sure if this is Mexican or Tex Mex. I think it's a mix of both, and depending what ingredients you use. You can also skip the sour cream, but I think it balances the flavors quite nicely. In general, great dish. Hope you like it. Press like, subscribe, activate the bell, all those kind of things, and see you in the next one.